It is officially 66 days until the Big Orange take the field in Neyland Stadium, but you don't have to wait over 2 months to overthink the season outcomes and stress out about who our starting quarterback is going to be because the Volatile Podcast is here for you. We are your weekly reminder that being a Vols fan is a terminal diagnosis that we all share. I'm Mac Williams, and tonight I'm joined by my buddies Jeff Wright and Nick Duncan. Nick, glad to have you back, man. How are you doing?
Good to be back. Doing pretty good. Enjoying not having to check the news cycle to see what bad things happen in Tennessee this summer.
Nice. Jeff, how you doing, man?
I'm okay, buddy. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Just ready to talk about some Vols tonight. So we'll jump into latest news. Football has some latest news. This is from Friday. Chaz Coleman and Tennessee have officially parted ways as of June 26. We all knew this was coming. Not necessarily a shocking bit of latest news, but it is official. Any other thoughts? I mean, we've talked about this a lot already, but obviously, I think we're all glad that this has kind of come to a head, yeah?
Yeah, I'm just glad it happened now and not during the season. Like, let's get it over with.
Yeah.
I'll be happy, I guess, when they have an immune system for this kind of nonsense. It seems like it comes up too much.
Mm-hmm.
Did y'all read? I guess I'm kind of surprised we hadn't covered this all the way through, but did you see they were keeping him on scholarship?
Did not see that.
Yeah, so they're keeping him on scholarship, according to the last thing I read, which makes me think that he's going to try to play football sometime in the future, and they're locking him down. And if that kid goes to play football somewhere else, he becomes like enemy number one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm too medically messed up, sad to compete, but I'm going to go somewhere else and do it. Like, okay, Boo Carter, Nico, Chaz is just as loathsome if that's the case, in my book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if that happens, I totally agree.
I mean, I feel like I heard something like that, but I thought the whole thing was like whatever they were doing was basically ensuring that he couldn't go play somewhere else this fall. It wasn't like they were trying to retain him for years future.
No, I think that's true, but I think that indicates that they think there was a chance that he was going to try to pull something. At least, you know, they can control him for a year in effect.
Right. Okay.
But that after this year, you know, as soon as the fall semester's over, he could jump somewhere else.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I mean, I don't necessarily hate that because it's, you know, you don't want him, you know, going. I to me, it's kind of like sticking it to him a little bit. You know, it's like, hey, you kind of hung us out the dry, so we're going to stick it to you. You're not going to get to go play somewhere else this fall.
Yes, and I have no criticisms of them doing that. I'm just kind of reading the tea leaves about what he's doing, and that's where I'm like, you're an awful person.
Yeah. Henry To'oTo'o, Jeremy Banks, join the list.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the guys you already mentioned, but I wanted to mention those two guys because those guys.
Jalen Hurd.
Hey, Jalen Hurd's a hero.
Canary in the coal mine. Did y'all make it through the Butch Jones interview?
Yes.
Haven't even tried. Can't do it.
Yeah, I started it and I was like, I'll come back to this. And I
listened to the whole thing.
Yeah. Give me a review.
For anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about, Andy and Ari did an interview with Butch Jones. They're a national college football radio show, and the whole interview is basically just them asking questions about Butch Jones's career as a coach, his time at Tennessee specifically. There were some questions. Butch Jones did what he always does, which is just painted everything with these coachisms and said general things that like sound good, which are probably technically true, but like anyone can say that. At the end of the day, what he didn't talk about was like lying about a player falling on a helmet when actually there were fights in the locker room, right? He didn't talk about that. What he didn't talk about was Jalen Hurd having a concussion and the training staff saying he shouldn't play and Butch Jones telling him to get in there anyways against Georgia. That's what he didn't talk about. And so, like, they all said Butch Jones came out seeming like a better person than his reputation would have. One of the guys on their show, it's like the producer, who doesn't really talk much, is apparently a big Tennessee fan. And he was saying that he felt like Butch Jones was more relatable, or he didn't hate him as bad because of his interview. And I think that's all just crap because he didn't really say anything that would be honest and pull back the curtain a little bit on what actually happened while he was there. It was just more general stuff like, yeah, we were really proud of what happened in the 2016 season, but it wasn't good enough at Tennessee. And it's like, well, that's true. But like, we all already knew that. So, it's not really telling me anything.
Well, the like coach speak and sunshine puffing is what made me be like, I'll come back to this. And I thought maybe I had seen some of that and I didn't know if it was the producer or whatever, but like, oh yeah, Butch is much more relatable or whatever. And I thought there must be substance at the end of this thing, but I'm not going to go back to it. I remain convinced, and I'm ready to take a patron who will make this happen. But there's an incredible book to be written about that era.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not going to, I mean, Butch Jones should be like quoted 4 times, and you should talk to people who will actually be honest with themselves and honest with the record.
Yeah. And
maybe that could be our first book. We could go out and do some journalism and get some interviews, get some insight.
There you go.
Okay, so low key, actually,
the most volatile portion of Tennessee history.
High key, how do we get Jalen Hurd on the podcast?
I met him once at the College Football Hall of Fame.
Did you alienate him?
No, this would have been the summer of, dude, no lie, this would have been the summer of 2016. This was right before that season. That was when I met him because I was there for my summer job in Georgia.
So he didn't block you on Twitter or anything?
No. Okay. Jalen Hurd was way more friendly than Josh Dobbs ever was. I'll say that.
Yeah. Okay.
Josh Dobbs has his reputation of being like, the nice guy, super smart. And obviously, like, he's a great player. He is very smart. But, like, Josh Dobbs is not actually as, like, jovial and, like, happy to see the fans as you would think. He's really not.
Yeah. I'm very willing to believe that. So I'm going to make this a mission. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to get Jalen Hurd on the podcast. Maybe we should come up with a 6 degrees of separation, like who's the closest to him that we could get on immediately and like stagger a few guys and then see if they could help us. But this is now a goal. It's officially a goal.
Yeah, I mean, that would be awesome. I mean, seriously, dude, like Jalen Hurd got all of the fury of the fan base,
me included. Yep.
During that time, and I really see him as a victim of that.
Absolutely. He was the canary in the coal mine. Like, he was the sign that something was bad wrong.
That's right.
And, like, I get, like, Jalen Hurts kind of got a little bit of, like, selfish football kind of mentality. And I think that's evident with his, like, the way the rest of his career panned out. But he was a great running back at Tennessee. And you could say,
we all loved Jawan Jennings, and he was singing the same tune by the end of that season. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good point.
Because he got kicked off the team, and they brought him back.
Thank you, Jeremy Pruitt.
Best thing Cornbread ever did for us.
How many times are we going to say that line?
that one time.
What is that?
Who told you to sneak?
All right.
All right. Do we have any other football news?
I saw a report that DGG is expected to be the first $1 million running back signee.
Not surprising.
Neat.
Yeah. This is your regular volatile scheduled college football is on life support.
Yeah. But also, like, given the state we're in, like, aren't you willing to pay that to get him if you can guarantee you get him?
I'm willing to spend all of the Haslam brothers' money that I can.
Right.
He can be the first $9 million running back for all I care.
Right.
But it's just college football has a terminal disease also.
Yes. No, I completely agree. But I agree. Like, as a whole, it's a problem. But, like, in this specific case, I'm like, let's just do what it takes to get him here.
Just give the man a bag and let's go.
Yeah.
I don't even know if even if it weren't like he's a sure thing, I would do it to make Ryan Day sad.
Yeah, at least run the price up, right?
Yeah, I'm willing to spend the Haslam's money very, flagrantly.
Absolutely.
I wish Danny White was.
True.
That's not precisely my first wish for Danny White.
Oh man. I don't think we have any new basketball news, so I'll skip that.
Well,
Baseball.
actually, you won't
Oh.
because this is my contractually obligated distraction. For anybody who
Sure.
cares, Zakai, Jacoby, and what's the Eastern European power forward we had a few years ago?
Milicic, Igor.
Yeah. They're all on the Spurs summer league team together.
Oh, fun.
Nice.
Yeah. I honestly would like to see Zakai and Jacoby in the same backcourt for a while, because I did spend some time this season being like, what would it be like to have Zakai playing pure point guard and Jacoby off the ball? I would like to know what that looks like.
Yeah.
Maybe the Spurs will give us the opportunity.
Yeah. But I'll never know because I hate the NBA.
Well, Dalton Knecht is still playing for the Lakers, and apparently they have a new big three, and they're all white guys. And Stephen A. Smith went off on the Lakers, how they can never win with white guys. So I'm a Lakers fan now.
That's great. Yeah, Stephen A. Smith, totally not a racist.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally not.
It was Igor, right? Because he just played last year. That's your thing.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I was going to say is not Darko Milicic, because I'm an old head.
Yeah, okay. Because it's definitely not Euros, because he was a few years ago.
No, it's not Euros. No.
Okay.
No, I don't believe he's getting a summer league invite.
If Euros is playing basketball, I'm sure it's in Europe.
Yeah, I think he plays in Spain, I think.
Yeah, that checks out.
Yeah, but
maybe Turkey. Maybe Turkey.
Yeah, that's true. I don't even know where he's from.
No, he plays while drinking wild turkey. That's what he's doing.
That guy was wild. So
I like Euros wasn't a good player, but he was a fun player. You know?
Yeah, he was very
fun. He was exciting. Yeah.
I had a really good time while he was on the court.
For sure. Friggin' Euros.
I'm sure he's one of those guys you really liked him, on your team. So
yeah.
It's not objectively funny, but my middle son was young enough that I would be like, Euros get ball, Euros dunk ball. And he just thought it was the funniest thing possible.
Oh, man. That's great. Latest baseball news. Blake Grimmer is withdrawing from the MLB draft and will be returning to Tennessee for the 2027 season. This is probably the best news of the baseball offseason, right?
I haven't been tracking
other than Appenzeller, like we were kind of freaking out that Appenzeller wasn't coming back. But yeah, it's right up there with that.
Yeah. I mean, Blake Grimmer was pretty good.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, he kind of got overshadowed a little bit, but
I'm just glad we get to say the Grim Reaper for another year every time he hits a home run.
Exactly. So
I did see somebody on Twitter say that the Vols might have the best transfer class this portal cycle.
They need it.
But that is something I have not been paying attention to at all.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and jump into our new this isn't really something we're doing consistently. It's not really new, but this week, instead of a draft or Mount Rushmore, we are doing Would You Rather Tennessee edition. So I'm going to ask some Would You Rather questions as we go. If you guys have some, definitely feel free to jump in and ask some of your own. These are just ones that I kind of came up with as I was thinking through this. So we'll jump in. And I'll start with Jeff, and you can answer the first one, and then we'll kind of just bounce back and forth, and we'll talk about them. The first question, Jeff, is, would you rather win 1 football natty or 3 basketball national championships?
Football natty, and it's not even a hesitation for me. It's just football is everything. Basketball is important, but secondary, I just want a natty in football before I die.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that? Feel differently?
Sorry, what was that?
I just asked if you agreed, so go ahead.
Yeah, 1 football natty.
Yeah, 3 basketball national championships would be amazing. That would be pretty awesome. I mean, 3 championships is huge and crazy, but football's king. The secondary follow-up question to this was, what about 1 football championship versus 5 baseball national championships? Nick?
Consecutive?
There's just 5. You can pick them back to back to back to back to back, or
still a football. It's still football, man. Football is just that much more important than everything. Like I I guess I would probably. I mean, I know I would cancel women's basketball for like $30 and a home game ticket. Um, but I would definitely get rid of it if we could get a national championship game. Would I get rid of the baseball program for a natty? I know you guys won't agree, and I'm insane, but like it at least becomes like I probably wouldn't do it, but I would sit around and think about it longer than anybody would think is reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, I would think about it for sure, but I don't know if I could do it. 5 baseball national championships. I don't know, guys. That one is like, because you're not saying you can't win one in football. Like, you just have to play out whatever happens. So
That's
I
just
don't know.
would you rather? I would rather win one football national championship.
All right, Mac. So here's my version of this then. 75 consecutive crew national championships.
I would take the football championship.
What if I bumped it to 150 in a row?
Just like the episode from The Office where Jim is asking Dwight like how many days he could go. I don't even remember what the question is, but he's like, "What about 100 days?" Dwight's like, "I could see that." He's like, "What about 101 days?" And then he just keeps going forever. So
We had a former student who, as a break the ice with our house at school, he would always ask, "Who wins, a billion lions or the sun?" It was lunacy because they would talk about it forever. He would just he'd come back and be like, "But it's a billion lions."
oh gosh.
It's hilarious.
All right, the next one. Would you rather win the SEC every year but never win a national championship, or win one national championship and never win the SEC again?
Nick, you go first on that one.
Probably the SEC every year.
Really?
I think so. Just because I don't think this one's hard because it's not plausible that you would win the SEC every year and not win a national championship.
Mm-hmm.
I just see the SEC as like, if you're good enough to win the SEC, you're like the best team in the country. I know it's just not always actually true, but it just feels like it's true.
But within the context of the question and framing, it excludes it.
Yeah.
I mean, we've said on here before and talked about how the
I guess in modern football, I'd say a natty, but
Right.
my heart traditionally thinking about what the SEC has meant, I would say SEC.
That makes sense to me. It just seems like conference championships have never been less relevant.
They don't mean anything anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we were able to change college football the way that Jeff specifically has mapped out before, and a lot of us have agreed with, where it was like hyper focus on regionalism, and the conference championship became, like in theory, if you're SEC champion, you're a Big Ten champion, and just the ACC and Big 12 champion. If those champions were a 4-team playoff, and those were the only 4 teams, and you just played, and those 4 teams were ranked, and the only way you got to the playoff is if you won the conference, I think that's when it's like, I would prefer to win the SEC. But in this scenario, like, you could not win the SEC every year and still be in the playoffs every single year.
Right.
And it's pretty plausible in today's football that would happen. So I think I would take the one natty.
Yeah, I hate to be like, I really appreciate you coming up with this segment because it's creative and I'm interested in the topic. But like, it feels to me like the national championship question is just the trump card. Like,
yeah.
Would you rather, lose one of your major organs or win a national championship?
Honestly, the organ would be an easier question for me.
Yeah, definitely if it's a kidney. I'd give a kidney right now.
No problem. No problem at all.
Yeah, and if I can just have dialysis long enough or whatever to like get me through seeing it. I mean, I've got young kids, but I would sit around and think about it for a lot longer than I probably should.
Exactly.
If you're a kidney, we'd take care of your kids. Something happened.
Yeah. Okay. Don't worry, man.
Sign the contract in my blood.
We'll get you one of the bricks on that wall outside Neyland Stadium now with your name on it. Don't worry.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. I thought you were going to say bury me with it, but
we'll get a statue of your kidney on campus. Efron gave his all for Tennessee. Just a kidney right there.
Recarve the rock to be the shape of a kidney.
Yeah. We'll put a little kidney statue where the guys can slap it every time they come out to the football field.
Oh gosh! All right, this one, Jeff, might be a little bit better. So, would you rather never lose to Alabama again, or never lose to Florida again?
Can I go? This is not hard.
Yeah.
Florida. It's not hard for me.
I disagree.
That's fine.
You know why?
No.
I applied logic to this. I would rather not lose to Bama ever again versus Florida right now because we play Alabama every year. We don't play Florida every year.
Yeah, I thought about that, and then I remembered how much I hate Florida.
Me too, but Alabama, man.
But in this scenario, we could, in theory, beat Alabama. Give me the question one more time.
Would you rather never lose to Alabama again or never lose to Florida again?
Yeah, so it's theoretically possible we beat Alabama. It's just uncertain.
Correct.
It's possible we beat Florida.
You're just guaranteeing you never lose to one of them.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's Bama.
For me, it's Florida because it can change. I mean, the how many times even already in our own life has who we played every year changed?
Totally.
100 years from now, we could have played Florida. We could have played Florida 85 more times. We don't know.
I think the SEC is showing you right now that they value Tennessee, Bama more than Tennessee, Florida. So if we ever don't play one of those two teams, it's going to be Florida, not Bama.
I think that's true, and that's reasonable because it's like the heart of the SEC's origin.
Right.
That is how it should be. I just hate Florida more than I hate Alabama.
Yep.
I mean, me too. In being a 30-year-old, in my lifetime, Florida's been a more frustrating team than Alabama. But the thought of never losing to Alabama again and playing Florida once every however many years and having a chance to beat them still, I think I'm taking that.
It's tougher in the framework that we're living in right now. It would probably be a no-brainer if we played Florida every year still. But
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'm still probably going to go Florida just because my animosity is higher.
Okay, respect. All right, the next one. Would you rather never hear Rocky Top again or never hear the Pride of the Southland band play again?
Nick, do you want to go first?
I need to think. Golly. Probably. Oh my gosh, it feels sacrilegious to say either one of these.
I know.
I'll just register now while he's thinking that this actually is something I have pretty good clarity on.
Really, I'm going to say never hear the Pride of the Southland band again.
Sorry,
Okay.
I meant to mute.
Jeff, what's your clarity?
100% that I would never hear the Pride of the Southland again. I ride around and listen to Rocky Top.
Mm-hmm.
It's the greatest tradition, in the game day experience. I my favorite version of the song is the Osborne Brothers. I don't listen to the Pride of the Southland play it on casual drives. So if you're going to make me pick, I'm just going to listen to Rocky Top for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the right answer. Let me change it a little bit and see if it changed your answer. So what if the question was you can never hear Rocky Top on recording or whatever ever again, but you could still hear the band play it, or you could never hear the band at all, never play it, but you can still have access to the song Rocky Top whenever you wanted.
Yeah, so this may be blasphemy on the podcast, but I just have to tell you how I triage these things. My love for Rocky Top goes beyond my love for the university. So it's just embedded in the region and the people that I love so dearly. Tennessee is basically my cosmos. And so losing that, in theory, the University of Tennessee could become so politically noxious and it could be part of the football program that even my support for the football program, which is just inconceivable to me, but I could just have to shelve that the way I did with other organizations that I used to not care about as much, but cared about pretty significantly. That's theoretical. But I'm always going to want to hear Rocky Top because of my love for my people and my place. So it's still, I want to hear recordings of Rocky Top.
Okay. Nick, does it change your answer, or are you still on the same page?
Same page.
Yeah, see, I think for me it would change it. So if I just basically couldn't listen to Osborne Brothers, that's the only version I really listened to anyways. If I just couldn't listen to the single version they recorded, but I could still have access to the band playing it in the stadium on game day, I would take that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, probably my second favorite version of Rocky Top is the fans singing it in the stands.
Mm-hmm.
This you have put us in a tough spot because like I don't want to minimize hearing the band play it, but I'm probably like they're probably my third, right? And so like I'm 2 steps away from what I'm actually most essentially caring about.
Yeah. Well, I thought that would be harder than it was. So
sorry, man.
No, it's all good. Would you rather Tennessee becomes a football powerhouse and baseball completely falls apart, or baseball becomes a dynasty while football is only like a 9 or 10 win program every year?
Football powerhouse.
Dude, yeah, it's just football. I mean, I feel like this is the universal knife, but yeah, it's football, man.
I would take baseball. I really would.
Really?
I would take baseball being a dynasty because I still get 10 wins from football. That means we can go to the playoff. That means we can win the national championship. Like I just in the current era we're in, like I would take baseball being like elite, the best program in the country, winning multiple national championships, and football still being a 10-win team. Yeah, give me that every friggin' day.
I can respect it because you have an affection for baseball that just dwarfs mine. I'm not going to beat up on you for it.
That's okay.
But like, and we're right that 10 wins.
I mean, I guess it depends. I guess what's the definition of powerhouse?
Multiple national championships, short frame of time, no slowing down.
Yeah, I'm taking that.
Yeah, sign me up for football.
I mean, basically like Ohio State, right? I mean, that's what they are.
Yep. Sign me up for that.
Yeah. I'd almost do it just for the joy of like making fun of my friends who are fans of other programs. That's almost enough. None of my friends who are fans of other teams care at all that we won a baseball natty. They're like, oh, that's sweet. That's fun. Good for you. I'm glad y'all have something. But they would be in agony if Tennessee was constantly putting its foot on their throat. And that's almost enough.
Yep.
Well, maybe my affections for baseball are misplaced. Maybe I love it too much, but I don't know, man. I love being good at baseball, and it's hard for me to give that away if we could be like amazing and still really good at football. So,
look, buddy, I just appreciate that about you. I'm happy to acknowledge my friend has a virtue that I don't have.
I don't know that it's maybe it's a vice. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. You're committed to the sport that's like number one in your heart, and basketball probably still like in experience, like the game I enjoy playing the most. That basketball would be that for me, but I just want Tennessee football to kill everything in front of them.
Yeah. All right. Well, for this next one, let's take personal, take your personal experience out of this next one. Okay, so you can't.
We're Tennessee fans, right?
Right. So what I'm trying to get at here is when you hear the question, I think you'll know what I'm saying. So the question is, would you rather erase the loss against South Carolina in 2022 or erase the loss against Arkansas in 2024?
Scar 22.
Yeah, same here, man, because that just puts a natty on the table. And
yep.
The Arkansas thing
you still went to the playoff in 24.
Yeah.
You still went to the playoff in 24 even with that loss.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the answer really hinges upon who your quarterback was, right? In 2022 with Hendon, and you have to if you erase the loss against South Carolina, I'm assuming and hoping that we're also Hendon Hooker's probably not getting hurt in that game. And if that's the case, you've got Hendon Hooker with an 11-1 Tennessee team going into a 4-team playoff at that time.
Well, that also puts him back in the Heisman race.
Dude, honestly, if you tell me we win that game, but Hendon gets hurt, I'll still take the 14 playoff with Joe and see what happens.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what would happen, buddy.
I know what would happen. I would still have liked to have seen it.
Nostradamus right here can tell you what would happen with that.
I would still have liked to have seen it. So,
Oh man,
you wouldn't have liked to have seen it either. I can tell you
hey, he beat Clemson by 30 that year in a bowl game. So
that
now,
we did.
if you could put your personal stuff into it, obviously we were at the 2024 Arkansas game. Does that change the answer for you? Like if it's all personal?
Yeah, the Arkansas loss just feels like a humiliation ritual for us, and I've got so many of those from my Tennessee fandom. You know, I just want Hendon to have been invited to the Heisman celebration, and I want Tennessee to have it on the table that maybe they could win a natty.
Yeah, I think 2022 South Carolina is the right answer.
Yeah, and that just would have been 2 college football playoff berths in the last 5 years, and that's just so much different than 1.
Yeah, it's 1 more than 1, in fact.
It is.
It's double the amount.
But in the last 5 years, it's a big difference.
Absolutely. It's double the amount.
Okay.
No, I agree with you.
Uh-huh.
One could argue that's like saying it'd be like, 4 over 10 years instead of 2 over 5 years.
Yeah. That's true.
So 40%, not bad.
Just go to the next question.
That's all of them. That's
the
all
next
of them.
one question, which is more. It's one more.
That's all of them. Unless you guys have one. That's all I had.
Yeah, I'm curious. This is morbid, so this is on brand for me. None of us are murderers. None of us want harm to come to anybody. But if you could Thanos snap somebody out of Tennessee history,
Oof.
Mac, I'm just assuming Jeremy Banks is on your short list. Danny White's on mine. They don't die or whatever. They just go away from Tennessee history.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an either or, but who would you Thanos snap out of Tennessee's history?
I got mine.
Go ahead.
I would do Lane Kiffin. Just because I think the fact that he came one year and left us in a lurch is what caused a series of awful things to happen after that. So I would have Thanos snapped him out, and then hopefully we would have hired somebody else, and the last 15 years wouldn't have been so bad.
That's a great answer, Nick, because you're thinking about it the same way I was, but I'm coming at it from a little different angle. Who was the athletic director when we hired Lane Kiffin?
Mike Hamilton.
That's who I would do. Because
that's my answer too.
That's a good one.
Lane Kiffin was a problem with how he handled it, but if the contract is set up correctly, it's not a problem anymore.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's true.
As much as I dislike Danny, Mike was just over his head. Like, he was a good guy. I think he was a believer. He was a good guy. He was just not cut out for the job. Didn't put the USC issue in there. And Lane was building momentum. All the stupid stuff that came out later, I totally get it. But Lane was building, and it just got aborted. And so, yeah, I would snap Mike out, hope we had a better AD who was more qualified for the job. And I think we eventually lose Lane Kiffin.
Right.
But we lose Lane Kiffin in a way that we probably had a couple years
We're in a better spot.
Yep.
And we probably get some fat buyout money.
Yep. Now, just from a sheer hatred standpoint, one person that obviously came to mind, it'd be nice to have Nick Saban gone or Steve Spurrier gone.
I wasn't thinking Tennessee related, but
okay.
I get where you're going there. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone like that kind of came to mind. Now, if it has to be directly affiliated with the university, then I was thinking around the 2009 season, so it would have to be someone like that. But if you could do just anyone that had an impact on Tennessee, even from the outside, it probably would be one of those elite coaches that had our number for so long.
If it was from the outside, it would have been Spurrier for me. I hated that guy my whole life.
Yeah.
I still, not that y'all are wrong, but I still have this. I don't really hate, or I don't want removed those coaches because I want us to beat them. You could do this with James Franklin too. That's one of my great frustrations. that we never got a chance to really humiliate James Franklin when he was at Vanderbilt. So I'm okay with these other teams having preeminent coaches. I just want Tennessee to be able to humiliate them or vanquish them or conquer them or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll move on to questions on college football. Tonight's question is kind of just a general, broad, like how you think about college football. So the question is, are rivalry games more important than the playoffs?
Hey, can I interject real quick just before we move into that?
Yes.
Nick, I'm going to suggest to you for the history segment, at some point do the run of athletic directors from Mike Hamilton to Danny White, because that's a underrated lens to look at the decline of Tennessee football through.
So I've been thinking about Rocky Top Roots as something to be encouraging during the summer before the bad stuff happens.
Let me fix that. Let me just put an end to that.
I've been thinking that everything from about the first week of September until the last week of May is bad enough, and that we could spoil ourselves in the summer by thinking of good things.
I also had that in mind, Nick,
am I on
just
the
to
right
clarify.
podcast? Did I sign into the wrong show? Come on, y'all.
I also was thinking about it the same way. It's about pride and who we are and our history.
I got sick in my stomach thinking about researching that. Oh my gosh!
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll do it as a mid sec. I'll do it. I'll bring it as like one of our middle section things. Yeah. Nick can give us like the glories.
It'll be Jeff's spinoff called Rocky Top Poops.
Not sure why that's the title, but yeah, okay.
It's like,
fits the vibes. It is the vibes.
Oh, geez. Anyways, question on college football. Are rivalry games more important than the playoffs?
No. The goal is to win a natty. You know, you could go through and beat, you beat Bama, Florida, Georgia, Vandy, and everybody's having a good time. But if you get throttled every year competing for a national, I just think that drags you down further.
This is tough for me because I'm thinking about the Ohio State fans that win natties and are still like miserable people because they lose to Michigan.
Yep.
Rivalry games are what make college football great.
Yes.
Can I just tell you, though?
I don't know that Jeff's wrong, but I'm struggling with the question.
Right.
Let me say that.
So I think
let me finish this thought.
Yeah,
we are currently experiencing the equivalent of losing to Michigan. Could we just choose the one where we compete for a natty? Yeah,
and I think questions like these and some of our would you rathers are hard because of the state of college football.
Yeah.
And so I think that I don't think that any of us are disagreed upon the fact that like Nick said, what makes college football so special, what makes it so unique is the fact that like a team can win a national championship but still lament over the fact that they didn't beat, the team they hate down the road. That's what makes college football so amazing and so different than the NFL. People in the NFL don't care if, like, I don't want to speak for Joe, but I'm pretty sure Joe ultimately would not lose sleep over the fact that the Steelers won the Super Bowl if they lost to the Ravens twice.
Yeah, like, he wouldn't care.
He wouldn't care. They won the Super Bowl. Whereas college football is uniquely special in the fact that like your rivalry games carry almost as much weight as a national championship game. And so I think in a world where college football is healthy. Yeah.
Is that really true? Almost as much?
I think in a world where college football is healthy and you actually have to perform at an elite level within your conference to make it to the championship game. And it's not like we're letting 12, 16, 24, however many teams they allow into the playoffs over the future years to come. I think in a world where college football is healthy, your rivalry games do and should matter just as much, if not more, than the national championship game. But in a state where college football is not healthy, then the national championship game becomes and the question was the playoffs, not the national championship game. The playoffs, the postseason. The postseason becomes more heavily weighted in a way that's not true to the tradition of college football.
Yeah, I totally glad to co-sign that. Like if you could just reduce it back to regionalism, as we've talked about,
Mm-hmm.
you could do what Bama did and just give yourself a national championship because you won in the best conference. Bama does that every so often. They just award themselves another national championship. Um, so yeah, I would prefer that whole scenario of like strict regionalism beating our rivals. I'm just in the I mean, it's basically like the NFL that you just laid out. I'm
Yeah.
so desperate for a national championship that I could handle theoretically, not that it would ever work this way, but we lose to Alabama, we lose to Florida, and we win a national championship. I'd sign
Yeah.
up for that.
No, and I would too. It's hard because I think that's antithetical to what like college football actually has been about for
Yeah.
most of its existence.
It's because they're killing the game. But yeah, like for instance, in 24 we made the playoffs, but 22 still feels like a better season. Like
Yep.
it's more fun. Like
That's
we
well
got
said.
the Bama monkey off our back that year.
Beat Florida.
Beat Florida. Yeah, and obviously we beat Bama and Florida also in 24. But 22 probably because there's just such a long drought with both those teams feels more sensational.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, and it was just funner to watch the games.
yeah, we just passed the eye test better
Yeah.
that year. Yeah.
I am curious if things hadn't played out with Nico the way they did. And let's say the next year wasn't even great. He was their quarterback. He got hurt midway through the year. He didn't improve significantly. But do you think 24 is weighted down by what happened with Nico?
Yeah, I think so.
Probably.
So we would look on it more fondly if Nico had played another year.
Yeah, but I think the 25 season he would have had to have shown improvement. I think you still would the 24 season would still be dampened if Nico had stayed if he's not good in 2025. But if he's good, like last year we won 8 games, right? Let's say with Nico he stays and you win 10 games or you win 9 and miss the playoff or whatever. I think that in that scenario, if you win a couple more games, and even if you still miss the playoff, you probably do look more fondly on the 24 season. But if in 25 you still only win 8 games and you lose to Oklahoma, you lose to Alabama, you lose the same games we lost, Georgia, then I think we'd still feel better about 22 than we did 24. Nico has to improve for us to feel any better about 24 in the 2025
So he couldn't be
season.
just the same player.
I don't think so because another year in Heupel's system, I would feel worse about Josh Heupel in that scenario than I would about Nico. I think my frustration would just shift to a different person.
Well, I think you're right. I think for me personally, it comes down to I thought in 22 we had a chance to beat anybody. Our best versus their best. We could beat anybody. I never really felt that way in 24. I kind of knew there was a hard ceiling.
Well, we squeaked by so many games that year.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, guys, is
Or didn't, like Arkansas.
what you're saying, Jeff, is like in 2022 you felt that way. In 2024 you didn't. I don't want to speak for you guys, but I think especially you guys when I talked to you, like you felt in 2025 last year with Joey, especially like halftime of the Georgia game, you probably felt more like that, similar to 2022, than you ever did in 2024, even though we won more games. Is that accurate?
Yeah, but just the window lasted so short. It was just up and gone.
Right.
And you have your heart ripped out with that friggin' field goal. You just didn't have. I mean, you had up until the South Carolina game to think, oh my gosh. I mean, there were billboards up in Cookeville that said like feels like 98. You know what I mean? That never really happened with Nico and his team.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Though I just feel like they're at the highest height of emotion and joy was higher in 25 than it was in 24, even with a better team.
But for like 10, for a half, or no, maybe not a half, for most of a game, and then you just get gut punched. So I think you're right that the experience of the Georgia game was comparable up until the very end, but it just went away so quick.
Yeah. Anyways, I do think that's an interesting question. I think that I think the question still is like, can Nico be the same player in 2025 and you feel better about 2024? I guess my answer on that question is no. Nico would have to be better in 2025 for me to feel differently about 2024.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just curious.
Does anybody disagree with that? Okay. The next question I had, following up the rivalry games question, was: are rivalries still the heartbeat of college football, or has the playoff become like the only thing that ultimately matters? And I think, Jeff, we've kind of touched on this a little bit, and it sounds like we're all generally in agreement that like college football, the state it's become is that the playoff is kind of the only thing that matters now at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I could nuance, which I'm known for doing, I think that's only retrospective for the year itself. Week to week, the most passionate you feel is when you're playing a rival.
Mm-hmm.
It's only in sort of summary at the end of the year that becomes clear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's really when championship week hits, when I'm doing the math and I'm like, okay, none of these games matter. Why did we just play a conference schedule for?
Dang. Man, that's dark. But yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we all knew Bama was getting in either way, right?
Right.
So
Yep. And then, yeah, my follow-up question to that, which again, I think we've already touched on it, but if anybody has any other thoughts, is like, should it be that way? Should it be that the playoffs are kind of the end-all, be-all?
I would get rid of a national championship right now and just have 4 different conferences that didn't play each other at the end of the year, if it meant that the regular season meant more.
Yeah, me too. And it seems like there's no going back with the money and the way that ESPN dominates so much of the sporting world and their interests and gambling interests.
Yep.
I'm pretty convinced this is a total side tangent about a little bit of politics, but I'm like legit convinced that America is going to get balkanized probably in our lifetime. And my hope for college football is that when it gets balkanized, so does college football.
I mean, it's doomer, but I'd almost sign a contract for that right now.
Yeah. I mean, Josh Pate talks a lot about how like the regular season should be the most important part of college football because it's what sets college football apart. And it really is the thing that makes it the most special. And the more that we add teams to a playoff, the more that we generate revenue using the postseason, the less emphasis becomes on a Saturday in the fall on a campus. And that's what makes college football amazing. And that's exactly right.
Yeah, like think about the other 2 big sports that we cover. Mm-hmm. If it's basketball or baseball and you're like, okay, you lose, like Arkansas is probably the baseball team that I've hated the most in most recent years, or Vandy. But if you told me we're going to get swept by Arkansas and Vandy in the regular season, but we're going to win a national championship, a College World Series, I would be like, I do not care. College World Series. Absolutely. And basketball, if you were like, you're going to lose to Kentucky twice, but you're going to win a national championship, I'd be like, national championship. It's not hard.
Absolutely.
Football, it's a harder question, but it's becoming less difficult, and that's the frustrating thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we got a new segment tonight. We're going to add this in for the next handful of weeks. We have 9 Wednesdays until it's football time in Tennessee, so we will record 9 more episodes. That's counting tonight. So our new segment is called the SEC Gauntlet. So what we will be doing is we will look at the schedules of 2 SEC teams every week, and we will walk through their season game by game and decide whether we think they're going to go over or under their win total for the season. So I have all of that queued up, and I'm just going to go in alphabetical order, except for we'll save Tennessee for last, and that'll be our kind of last preview before the season starts. So tonight we are looking at Alabama and Arkansas going alphabetically. So I will kind of give you the over-unders, give you a brief overview of their schedules, and then we'll kind of go through game by game and just pick wins or losses, and we'll see where the podcast ends up over or under. So Alabama's over-under win total is 8.5. Alabama this year plays East Carolina, Kentucky, Florida State, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas A&M, LSU, Vanderbilt, UT Chattanooga, and Auburn.
Golly.
Yeah,
That is
so
such a loaded back end of that schedule. That's
yeah,
like two
yeah.
different seasons.
Funny enough, Jeff,
Pretty soft
Ala-
overall, though.
yes, Alabama has one of the softer schedules in the SEC compared to other SEC teams.
I'm
Um,
stunned.
Yeah, there's no Texas on this list. Florida State, we'll see. I mean, obviously, Florida State was pretty bad last year. We'll see how good they are. But they don't play any, when you look at like Texas's schedule, they play Ohio State, right? And they also play all the SEC teams that they play. Anyways, we'll kind of go through this game by game. The first game, September 5th, this is East Carolina. I'm assuming everyone has this game as a win for Alabama, right? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to do wins times 3. Kentucky is the following week. Bama goes on the road for Kentucky. Does anyone think that the Wildcats can beat Alabama in this game? No. Okay. Florida State. Bama gets them at home. At home. Is anyone seeing Florida State being better and beating Alabama at home?
No.
No, this is the Mike Norvell
Mike
funeral.
Norvell's going to get fired this year. So
Yeah.
Maybe
I
after
agree
that
with
game.
that as well. If it was on the road, it's possible. Obviously, Bama lost to Florida State last year, and Florida State was bad. So it's possible on the road. At home, Alabama's not going to lose this game, especially, they've had – I mean –
and
it's
for
an
that
SEC
very
game.
reason, right? Like this is a revenge game, and it's at home.
Right.
So
Right. Exactly. The next game is South Carolina at home for Alabama.
it's in Bryant-Denny.
It's in Bryant-Denny.
Yeah, I'm going Bama.
I
Yeah.
am too, man. And look, it's going to, my son is going to hear this and laugh at me. I'm still just not sold on Lenore Sellers. Like I think I just don't even know that game's going to be particularly challenging.
No, Lenore Sellers has to prove it at this point, So I don't think that's a hot take at all. I think that's reasonable. Like it's possible. This is where I think you and I differ, Jeff. I think it's possible Lenore Sellers comes out and actually has a good year and actually is a good player. But I do think that he has to overcome what he's done so far and change the way he's played and be better. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not. But it's possible that it does.
I think you have to say it's possible based on his ability, his talent.
Right.
But I also just need some evidence that he can capitalize on it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. The next week, this is October 3rd, Alabama goes on the road to Mississippi State. So, Nick, what do you think about this game? You got Bama winning this one on the road at Mississippi State?
Yeah, I mean, I like Lebby, and I think that game will probably be closer than it should be, but I just don't think they'll have the weapons to compete with Bama. It'll just be roster against roster. Bama's just going to be a lot more talented team.
Yeah, I agree. Jeff, you agree with that too?
Yeah, it's right out of my own head. I really want Lebby to win, but I just don't think they'll have the horses.
Yeah. All right, this is the first game where obviously we might have some differing answers. October 10th, Alabama gets Georgia at home. October 10th. Who you got winning this game, Jeff? Let's start with you.
Yeah, I'll go Georgia. As much as I don't think of Kirby Smart as a great coach, he's probably comparable to Bama's guy, and I think he'll have a better roster.
Mm-hmm. Nick?
Yeah, I'm going to say quarterback continuity with Gunnar Stockton. I'm going to go Georgia.
I'm going to go with a win here for Bama, so I'll be the only person that's different. The reason I'm doing that is just because I feel like Georgia tends to figure their stuff out later in the year. I think Georgia, this is a game where Georgia's going to probably go on the road and struggle. I think it'll be a tight game either way, but I'll take Bama to win this one. I do think Georgia will end up having the better season, but I feel like this is a game where Alabama could try and plant its flag and win. So I'll take Bama in this one. So I'll be the lone guy on Bama. So far we have you guys have Bama 5-1 with the loss at Georgia. I have Bama 6-0. And then October 17th, the third Saturday in October, Bama goes on the road to Neyland Stadium. Who you got winning this game?
I'm going to go with recent history. Home team wins.
History. My goodness. Oh, my goodness.
Are you playing quarterback, Nick?
Yeah, right. That's my question. Who's our quarterback?
I might go for it if you're playing quarterback. How much eligibility you got left?
I'm going to go with history until it ain't.
Dude, I just can't. I just don't know that we have a quarterback for this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just hard for me to think we beat a team. Yeah, it's just hard for me to think you beat with a true freshman or an almost true freshman in terms of game
Yep.
experience.
I agree. I got Tennessee losing this game. So that puts Nick's record for Alabama at 6-1. I am also at 6-1 with Bama, and Jeff, you are at 5-2 for Alabama here at this point in the season. The very next week after Bama goes on the road to Tennessee, they will play Texas A&M at home. Texas A&M at home for Alabama in the last Saturday in October for them because of the following week's their bye week. So Nick, you start with this one. What you got in Texas A&M and Bama?
This one's tough. I'm going Bama. I think A&M, because of last year, is going to be overhyped, and I don't think they're going to be as good as last year.
A&M is a rich man's version of my beef with South Carolina and Lenore Sellers.
Okay.
I think they're a much better roster, but I need to see their quarterback move the ball through the air consistently against good defenses.
Mm-hmm.
And so this one is really tough for me because I'm skeptical about him. When Tennessee plays him, he's going to look like a demigod, particularly running the ball. But this is much closer to a toss-up for me. It's at Alabama.
It's in Tuscaloosa. Yep.
All right, I hate Alabama, so I'm going to give the edge to Texas A&M. I want Texas A&M to humiliate them at home.
Yeah, I think this is one of the more tough games on the schedule to pick. Because it's at home, I definitely lean Bama, but I obviously would not be shocked if Texas A&M wins this game, especially because Bama will have just played Georgia and Tennessee back to back before this game. I really think because I don't really think Tennessee is going to be able to compete with Bama this year because of our quarterback situation. That game's not going to be as difficult on Bama as it should be, and that would normally help Texas A&M. So I'm going to go with Bama getting a win in this game at home as well. So that's me and Jeff on the win there, and Nick's taking the loss. So that puts our records now for the group. Nick, you have Bama at 6-2. Jeff, you have Bama at 7-1, and I also have Bama. Or sorry, no, Jeff, you have Bama at 6-2. I have Bama at 7-1. So then their bye week comes, and then following that first weekend in November, they travel to Baton Rouge to play LSU in Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, I think they should lose to LSU. I don't think they're as talented, and LSU has a better coach.
Go Tigers.
Yeah, I'm taking LSU to win that game as well at home. So that's 3 losses right there for Bama. So that puts all of us at, if I'm doing my math here correct, Jeff has 1, 2, 3 losses. Nick has 1, 2, 3 losses, and I have 2 losses. So I'm the odd man out here. But that's my second Bama loss. At Vanderbilt for the following week. Clean sweep here for Bama?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. UT Chattanooga at home the next week. I'm assuming clean sweep for Bama.
It's going to be tough.
Oh, man. And then the last week of the season, the Iron Bowl, Bama gets Auburn at home this year for the Iron Bowl.
Closer than it should be, but Bama will win. Would be thrilled to be wrong, but I don't think Golish will have enough weapons to beat Alabama in year one.
But Golish is really good at getting his team ready for Bama.
He's played against them really tough for 2 years in a row.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he has his quarterback.
I think it's close enough to be maybe not quite a toss-up, but like close enough that usually I would give that to the home team. But because I want Alabama to fire their coach, and have a bad season, I'm going to give the benefit to Golish and say Auburn ends his DeBoer's Alabama tenure.
Wow. I hope that's true. I mean, also though, there's like a part of me that's like, it would be miserable to watch, Josh Heupel lose to Bama in year 5, and watch Alex Golish beat Bama in year 1. That would be pretty brutal.
Well, I would just refer you to Tennessee football history.
Hard to argue that.
That is true. All right, so the final tallies here. Mac, I have Bama going. Let's see, 7,
10-2, right?
1. Yes, 10-2. I have them only losing 2 games. My 2 losses are to, LSU
and A&M.
And no, I have them beating A&M. So I actually have them. I have them 11-1. Jeff, you have Alabama losing 1, 2, 3, 4 games. So you have them 8-4, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nick,
dear Lord, if you're listening, sweet Lord Jesus, who
I should be the twin. I think I'm 9-3.
9-3. Yep. So you have 3 different shades of Bama here. I'm the highest on them. Nick is in the middle, and Jeff, you are 8-4. That puts the cumulative average for Bama at a little bit above 9 wins. And again, their over and under is at 8.5. So thinking about 8.5, we just went through the whole schedule. Jeff, you have them a half a game below their over under. I know you guys aren't gamblers, but if you had to place a bet on this over under 8.5, where are you falling now that you've walked through their schedule?
Oh, we're talking about cash money. Like, what would I be willing to wager on this?
Either way, yeah. Let's just say $10 bet. $10 bet, pretty standard. If you're putting $10 on it, you going over, you going under 8.5.
Yeah, I'm gonna go under.
Okay. Nick?
I'm comfortable with over.
Yeah, same. I think Bama can get this over pretty easily. I think their schedule is really favorable this year. So we'll see. We will see. All right. We're really going to basically the opposite side of the SEC here in terms of wins and losses. Arkansas's over-under is at 4.5. 4.5. So running through their schedule real quick, Arkansas starts off the season with
– which basically, before you start, means are they going to win 2 conference games? Right? That's the question. Assuming they don't play anyone really good non-con.
So that's the caveat. They would 2 conference games is safe. They do play a little bit of tougher opponent.
Okay.
I think their opponent at their level is tougher than Bama playing FSU at their level, if that makes sense.
I got you.
So,
okay.
All right. So their schedule reads North Alabama, Utah, Georgia, Tulsa, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Missouri, Auburn, South Carolina, Texas, and LSU. So we'll start at the top. North Alabama. Arkansas plays them at home on September 5th. 3 wins across the board? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Next, Arkansas goes on the road to Utah.
Loss.
I just don't know enough about Utah. I knew they were on the uptick.
They just lost their coach. He's at Michigan now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And do we know anything about their new guy? Does he have much credibility? Or was he kind of a fallback?
Couldn't even tell you his name.
Yeah. I mean, my gut says the SEC, just on virtue of – and particularly it's early, so they're not dealing with injuries.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think
we got two new coaches here, though. Two new coaches.
Arkansas – that's where I was going. Arkansas is not particularly stable right now either. Yeah, give me Arkansas on this one. I'm just going to be I'm going to be a regionalist.
All right. Jeff's got the lone win there. I'm taking Arkansas to lose that game at Utah. The next week, they play Georgia at home. Losses across the board? Yeah.
Hills.
I don't care if they play Georgia on Mars.
Yeah, that would actually be favorable to Georgia probably because
Georgia scout team.
Right. All right. Arkansas at home versus Tulsa.
Also a program I'm not super familiar with.
Probably will be closer than it should be, but I'll take Arkansas.
I also will take Arkansas. Jeff, Arkansas, yeah?
Same deal. If I'm taking them over Utah, I'm going to take them over Tulsa.
Yeah, makes sense. The following week, this is October 3rd now, Arkansas travels to Texas A&M.
That'd be a big L for me.
Loss.
Yep. Arkansas at home against Tennessee.
I'm going to take an L for Arkansas.
That's a
on that
loss
one.
for Arkansas.
I think Arkansas is going to win.
I hate you, Mac.
I know. I hate myself.
Who's the most negative Vol fan now?
Right.
Yeah, me. We don't have a quarterback voice.
Dude, I'm going to be in a dark, but I mean, do they?
Do they?
Doesn't matter
Why?
Why?
because it's in Arkansas. We always play bad in Fayetteville.
We're going to win that game.
I hope to be wrong. I would love
If
to be
we
wrong.
don't win that game, boys, it's going to be a long season.
I mean, I think this is Arkansas is like the one game that for me makes it like a 7-win team, a 7-8 win team for Tennessee this year. Anyways, the next week Arkansas goes on the road to Vanderbilt.
I should not have to think hard about this, but it's 2026. So
They're at Vandy.
At Vanderbilt.
is Vandy playing this true freshman?
I think so.
I think that's – I mean, I don't think they have any other option.
Yeah.
Right.
Man, I'm going to say Arkansas wins.
Yeah. Agreed. Jeff?
Yeah, my gut says Vandy, actually. Is Vandy not a more stable,
Yes.
secure program at this point? And
Probably.
if their quarterback is serviceable, yeah, I'm gonna go Vandy. I may regret that.
All right. So Jeff's got the lone loss there, and Nick and I are taking Arkansas to win this game. Right, Nick? You took Arkansas to win. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Next week is bye week for Arkansas. On Halloween night, Arkansas plays at home against Missouri.
Total flip of the coin. They're at home.
Yep, at home.
I'll take Arkansas at home. I don't know. It's Drinkwitz.
I know,
Drink
man, but
Daddy.
he tends to have a better season every year than I think he
know.
will.
Dadgummit.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
All right,
going to go Missouri.
I'm gonna go Missouri. I'm changing. I'm gonna go Missouri.
Speaking of people I'd love for Tennessee to put the boot on, that's like the James Franklin for right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. All right, I'm going to take Arkansas to lose this game. Y'all took Arkansas to lose as well. Yeah. So that's losses times 3. All right. Auburn. Arkansas goes on the road to Auburn in the first week of November. Who you got?
That's an Auburn dub for me.
Auburn.
Yep, same. I like Alex Golish. I think he's a better coach than Josh Heupel. All right. Arkansas then plays South Carolina at home.
Did you have to say it?
I just wanted to say everyone's thinking it. Everyone's thinking it might be true. I'm just going in and saying it is true.
I'm thinking it might be true. I'm not convinced yet. South Carolina.
What's the
Arkansas at
proverb?
home, South Carolina.
Give strong drink to him who's perishing.
Yes.
South Carolina home. I'm gonna go South Carolina.
It's Arkansas at home, just to be clear.
Yeah, I'm going
Arkansas.
South Carolina.
I'm still gonna go South Carolina.
Okay, I'm going to take Arkansas to win this game. I think by this point, the wheels are falling off for South Carolina, and I think that what's his face? Help me, Beamer. I think Shane Beamer is one foot out the door at this point. So I'm going
from your lips to God's ears.
Arkansas to get this win. So y'all are on Arkansas to lose. The next week, Arkansas travels to Texas. Arkansas at Texas.
Oh, okay.
That's a loss.
But okay, yes, it's a loss. But are you guys convinced Texas can live up to the hype?
No.
Like,
Totally unconvinced.
there's a part of me that says Arkansas could just catch them in sort of a trap game scenario.
The only coach that I feel confident can get their talent to live to its full potential right now is Kirby.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I hate myself, but
Yep. I'm also on Texas winning that game. So Arkansas, that's 3 losses. And the last week of the season, Arkansas plays LSU at home.
That'll be an LSU dub.
loss.
Okay. 3 across the board. All right. So running through the overall record predictions, Jeff, you have Arkansas going 1, 2, 3, 4, 4-8.
Yeah, sounds right.
I have Arkansas going 4-8. And Nick, you have Arkansas going 4-8. So that is a consensus from the Volatile Podcast on Arkansas's record 4-8. The over/under was 4.5. Sounds like we're all taking the under. Yep. Okay, absolutely. All right, that was our first time ever doing the SEC Gauntlet. Next week, we'll do 2 more teams, continuing in alphabetical order, skipping Tennessee. And our last segment tonight is the most important, the best, which is Rocky Top Roots. Nick, what are we talking about tonight, man?
Tonight, we are talking about the glorious name of Tennessee Volunteers. So this will probably not be earth-shattering to you guys. Maybe our listeners will learn a little bit, but we're going to talk about how Tennessee got its name, the Volunteers. So Tennessee, not just as a team, as a football team or as a university, but the whole state earned the nickname the Volunteer State primarily because of its military volunteerism, which has been a hallmark of who we are as Tennesseans. So going to walk through how we earned that name and then how it stuck. So very early on, even before Tennessee became a state in 1796, they showed their volunteer spirit. So in 1780, Colonel John Sevier, who would go on to be our first governor, he called for 100 men to go and fight during the American Revolution on the frontier. And he ended up receiving twice that many. He received around 200 volunteers to go and fight. The Over Mountain Men is what they were called. And they marched for like 3 days to Kings Mountain and won a battle for the American Revolution, which a lot of people see. You know, it's difficult with wars to say, like, here was the one turning point of the war. But this was definitely one of those times where there was a huge swing in momentum, particularly in the Southern theater. American Revolution was fought primarily in New England and then primarily in the Carolinas. And the goal for the revolutionaries in the South was to keep Cornwallis and everybody bottled up in the South, try to leave Washington free to do his thing in the North. And Kings Mountain played a part in setting them up for an even bigger win a few months later. Moving on to the War of 1812, around 1,500 Tennesseans volunteered to fight under General Andrew Jackson, who would go on, of course, and become the 7th president of the United States. They played a key role in the Battle of New Orleans. Fun fact, the Battle of New Orleans was actually fought a couple days after the War of 1812 ended, but we didn't have telegrams and cell phones, so General Jackson did not know that. And so won a huge battle at the Battle of New Orleans. General Jackson became a legend for that battle, kind of launched his political career. But this earns widespread praise for Tennessee, further establishes Tennessee Volunteers' nickname. The newspapers from all over the country were highlighting the military spirit of Tennessee men. And then during the Texas Revolution, this is probably the biggest and most famous that happened. So the Texas Revolution is fought in 1835 and 1836. Prominent Tennesseans like Davy Crockett, Sam Houston, others, they volunteer to aid Texas against Mexico. And Crockett died at the Battle of the Alamo, and he led a group of Tennessee mounted volunteers at that battle. And it became a lasting symbol of kind of the volunteer spirit. It of course, if the listeners listened a few weeks ago, we talked about the Rifleman logo that was very prominent in the 80s, the one's on my hat. That is supposed to be Davy Crockett. And this is kind of where the volunteer name is cemented. So about 10 years later, the Mexican-American War. Oh, I'm getting a timeout.
Yeah, I just want to note for all of our listeners who are deeply invested in this, this is 3 now of the Hickory Classical Christian School Hall namesakes
It's
covered in
true.
this episode. Imagine not having one of those 3 as your Hall name.
I can't imagine it. I can't fathom it. Moving on about 10 years into the future, in the 1840s, the later 1840s, the Mexican-American War is raging, and President James K. Polk, who was a Tennessean himself, one of our 3 presidents that come from the state of Tennessee, James K. Polk calls for 2,600 volunteers, and over 30,000 Tennesseans responded. So like 10 times the amount that he asked for. Further solidifying the reputation of Tennessee always being willing to send volunteers to fight for their neighbors. 1898, the Spanish-American War, you have another wave of volunteers from Tennessee. And this is kind of coinciding with the rise of like modern college. Well, it's not modern college football, but just college football generally. Kind of the late 1800s, early 1900s is when the game starts to take off in popularity. And so Tennessee football officially began play in 1891. And early on, the team is sometimes you can find them just referred to as the Tennesseans or as varsity. A lot of teams just called their A team varsity at that point. But the volunteer name gains traction in 1902 specifically. We had a key late season game against Georgia Tech, and a gentleman named T.B. Green scored a game-winning touchdown, and we beat Georgia Tech 10-6. And the next day, the Atlanta Constitution, of course, Georgia Tech's in Atlanta, so the Atlanta Constitution as a newspaper would have an interest in covering this game. They refer to Tennessee in the newspaper article as the Volunteers, and the name catches on. It catches on calling Tennessee's football team the Volunteers in 1902. By 1905, 3 years later, the University of Tennessee had officially adopted Volunteers, and of course it later gets shortened to Vols, as its athletic nickname. And that's kind of how it started. So early colonial America, early years of Tennessee became a state in 1796. So over the course of the 100 years, kind of between statehood and then between the rise of college football, there were several key conflicts where we sent way more men than what were called for by various generals and or presidents. And so that's kind of how Tennessee settled in on the volunteer nickname. There are several other nicknames that Tennessee is called in those early years. One of my favorites being Hog and Hominy, the Hog and Hominy State. Shout out to, I think it's called the Tennessee Nerd podcast or something
Tennessee
like that.
History Nerd.
The Tennessee History Nerd. Thank you. Shout out to the Tennessee History Nerd. If you're a Tennessean, you want to learn Tennessee history. There's a podcast called the Tennessee History Nerd, which is relatively new. And he does an episode on the various early nicknames of Tennessee. Hog and Hominy is one of my favorite. It's funny because I never think of Tennessee as a place that's like producing mass quantities of hogs and corn or anything like that. But it was the frontier in the early years. We have to remember that Tennessee was the frontier. Hence our frontiersmen, hence Davy Crockett. And they've continued this tradition, probably not to the degree early on. Like we don't send more volunteers necessarily than like other states. Tennessee's just not as populous as a lot of other states. At any given point in modern history, California and Texas are sending the most. But per capita, Tennessee sends more volunteers even still. Like if you think about the global war on terror since 2001, Tennessee's had more volunteer military men per capita than California, even though it's much bigger. Raw numbers, California's bigger because they have more people. That's not true for places like Texas. Texas per capita sends more than Tennessee, but it is true in pretty much every conflict that Southerners generally per capita send many more voluntary military men than like the Midwest or New England or the West Coast. I think I saw Washington State as a particular outlier in that. So I don't know what's going on in Washington State, but they send a lot of volunteer soldiers as well. Lots of data around that. If you're interested in that, you can find lots of modern data about who sends the most volunteer soldiers. Tennessee has a particular history in the modern day of having a lot of National Guardsmen. So we have something like 28,000 National Guardsmen, which is more than what is typical for a state of our size. And our National Guardsmen have even gone pretty often to fight in foreign conflicts like Desert Storm, Kuwait, and more recently the GWAT, the Global War on Terror. So still part of our tradition, but that is how the volunteer nickname came to be. And it's a pretty cool thing to be proud of. I'm always proud that Tennessee is not some generic mascot like an eagle or a bulldog or some southern states that pick like exotic African animals as their mascot, which makes zero sense. And so even if I wasn't a Tennessee fan, I genuinely think I would respect the fact that various things that we've talked about this year, like Rocky Top, Smoky, Blue Tick, Coonhound, Davy Crockett, Frontiersman, Volunteers, all of these things are specific to our place and the people that make up that place and have for, the last 400 years. So this is just one more of those things. So glad to be a Tennessee Vol. It's great
Absolutely.
to be a Tennessee Vol.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation a few years ago with the guy from Montana, and he had played college football in the Big Sky Conference, which is kind of like the SEC of the
Pacific
Western,
Northwest.
Pacific Northwest, where football resources aren't as big, but that's like the highest conference that you could attain, in those parts of the country. And I think something like the last 5 or 6 national champions at the FCS level have all come from the Big Sky. So they're kind of our dominant conference at that level right now. Anyways, I had a conversation with the guy who played for Montana State in the Big Sky Conference, and he learned that I was from Tennessee, pretty quickly. And the first question he asked me once he kind of realized like I was from Tennessee and I was a football fan was, "Why is Tennessee the Volunteers?" He's like, "I don't understand that name." And so it was really awesome to get to like sit and explain why we're called the Volunteers, because to outsiders it kind of seems like a silly name.
Yeah.
But once I explained it, you could tell he was very impressed, I guess, with the level of thoughtfulness and the history behind it. And I really do think that Tennessee probably has the most unique nickname of any university out there. Obviously, there's other ones that I think are unique. Like obviously, like Crimson Tide is unique. And so I as much as I hate Alabama, like I appreciate when schools kind of lean into their history and those things. But like none of them have as much meaning nor uniqueness as Tennessee when you combine those two factors.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, they're not a traditional SEC team, but I guess like the Oklahoma Sooners is kind of a unique thing.
Even Vanderbilt Commodores, right? Like Commodores
absolutely.
is unique.
Yeah. So even
it's also ridiculous from a landlocked state.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, and then outside of the SEC, there's not a lot. Like I appreciate the Virginia Cavaliers. Like that's one that I respect.
North Carolina Tar Heels. Shout out to Jeff.
Yeah, that was great too.
Tar Heels is great.
But the difference
Mountaineers is generic, but West Virginia, that at least makes sense.
Right.
I do think the Tar Heels are comparable, but they're more ashamed of it. Like their fans don't even know why they're the Tar Heels.
Right.
And so like that it's still part of our pride.
It's at the forefront of our minds all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Another thing that stood out to me while you were talking about that, Nick, so my uncle served in the Air Force, and when he went through his basic training, they have to do training on like using weapons and shooting various guns and things like that, and they have to do different tests that test your accuracy, your familiarity with the weapon, how are you able to load it and take it apart and all these different things. And he tells this story. This is like a story that gets told every year at the holidays when we see him. And I always look forward to it. But he tells a story of him being at basic and they were doing target practice. And the officer over him who was kind of like watching these grunts shoot at targets, he walked by and he said, "Garrett, come here." And my uncle like gets up and goes over to him, and he said, "Garrett, you're from Tennessee, aren't you?" And my uncle goes, "Yes, sir." He's like, "I can tell with how you're hitting that target." And so my uncle always talks about how all the guys that he served with, the Tennessee guys who are regularly using weapons and things like that, all of those guys are way more accurate and familiar with weapons when they enter the military compared to other states, just because it's such an integral part of how we live our lives. And so, like, kids are growing up from the time they can walk, learning how to fire a weapon and being familiar around them. And that really, even though we may not have as many guys in the military as some other states, the guys that we send to the military tend to have a really great background in things that go along with military life that other states, that's just not an integral part of their culture.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Even when I was reading the stats about like how many volunteers Texas sends per capita, I felt like anything with Texas, I like that's just an extension of the Tennessee spirit. They wouldn't exist without us. Like
exactly,
a lot of Tennesseans moved to Texas, and when Tennessee stopped becoming the frontier, a lot of them went to Texas, and so that spirit kind of carried on there. So there's always kind of a familial aspect between Tennessee and Texas. So as always, we like to remind our Texas friends that they would be playing soccer in Mexico if it wasn't for us. So
that's right.
Yep. It's sweet of little brother to emulate our orange.
I forget who we were playing in recent years, and someone was like, "What's a volunteer?" or something like that, and we were like, "It's the reason you're not called Mexico or something." Yeah, North Mexico.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true too, and it's so funny. Like, the University of Tennessee started in 1794. Texas wasn't even a part of the United States at that point.
Yep.
So like the University of Tennessee has been around long before Texas even dreamed of existing.
Yeah, they always clap back with how they were their own nation for a little while. Yeah. Should have stayed their own nation.
Yeah.
Sure. And again, though, even their opportunity to do that is on our shoulders. I'm a artificial intelligence skeptic, but I've used Grok for a search engine for a long time. And I spent about a year demanding from lots of different reasons that my Grok interface know that every time I say UT, it's Tennessee, it's never Texas.
Absolutely.
And, like, Grok would argue with me. And when the SEC kind of decreed that when Texas came in, I just kept hammering the Grok interface until it was finally like, you know what, this is locked in. I'll never again. I was like, you need to run this up your internal programming so every instance of Grok knows this is the case.
Oh man, that's amazing.
Planning an inception in Grok's mind.
Yeah. I mean, I'd just chew it out and be like, no, you've got this wrong. You're supposed to be better at this. I'm sorry, I should be, Yeah, get it right. Clicker.
Oh, gosh.
That's great.
Oh, man. Well, thank you, Nick. Yeah, that was a great segment. And, I mean, we mentioned a few, Virginia, North Carolina, West Virginia. Is being as unbiased as possible, is there any of these that you think carry as much, not just significance in terms of uniqueness or but is there any that carries much significance in the role they played in the formation of our nation as Tennessee's mascot or nickname, whatever, has played? Is there any university that even comes close?
Yeah, that's a good question. I probably have to sit and think about it. I will say this, Tar Heels is probably the one that sticks out the most other than Volunteers. And I don't know enough about North Carolina traditions to know this, but to me, it's like, it's just the fact that it's every Tennessee tradition, right? It's like everything we do goes back to the root of who we have always been. And I don't know enough about North Carolina traditions to know if that's the case for them, but Rocky Top is legendary for a reason. Like, people hate it. And I don't know of another fight song, that people hate in the way that they hate Rocky Top. So, yeah, I mean, off the top, I can't think of one. but somebody might be able to correct me.
My friend Rhett, who's sort of for South Carolina what we are for Tennessee, and his family's like got ties to state legislature and stuff like that. I may have told y'all this before, but when I'm kind of walking through state pride with him, he'll say, well, because South Carolina gave birth to North Carolina gave birth to Tennessee gave birth to Texas, we consider those our most successful colonies. That's kind of
That's funny.
Yield the point to him,
Yeah.
The son has surpassed the father.
To that point, though, like North Carolina, they're the Tar Heels, but their physical mascot, right, is like the ram thing. Jeff, do you know the significance behind that?
I think it's tied to the idea that the Tar Heels were great mountain fighters, and so like when you think about what animal thrives in rocky terrain, you go to a goat.
It's a goat.
Yeah.
Okay.
And their other mascot is a foot with a dark spot on the heel.
Right.
Or they're the logo.
That's more. Yeah, it's more of a logo, right? Because
yeah.
They should dress up as a foot and walk around.
I mean, maybe I'm sleeping on Florida State a little bit, because obviously like Seminoles in Florida State, like Seminole country, that's a huge part of Florida's history. So that's probably a pretty good one. It's better than Gators and Hurricanes, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. What's
I think
cool
you're
about
right that Oklahoma's the closest comp. I kind of it's kind of cool for Oklahoma to do that.
Yeah. What's cool about Florida State too is just the fact that like their logo and their nickname are the same, So and their mascot. So like obviously at Tennessee, we're the Volunteers. We do have like a guy that's dressed as Davy Crockett or a frontiersman, generally speaking. But like our mascot truly is Smokey, which also is true to that culture and is true to like the history. But it's still two different things, Whereas Florida State, they do have the bonus of like it's the same thing, Unlike Tennessee,
the Seminole riding out throwing the spear into midfield is pretty
awesome.
Cool. Yeah,
it's pretty awesome. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, Oklahoma, the Sooners, like their mascot is like a horse,
it's like the covered wagon and everything. Yeah,
right. Well, but their physical like mascot though is just a horse.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was another one where it's like the Sooner is different than the mascot. I still think it's cool, and I actually don't dislike that more or less. I find that to be different than like Florida State, where it's like they have a tradition that makes sense, but they also have the benefit of like their mascot also matches their nickname.
Between the SEC and the ACC, with most of those teams being primarily in the South, I think a lot of those mascots and traditions are just generally better than the Big Ten, to be sure.
Yeah, agreed.
Like there aren't many Big Ten teams you would look at, and like the Terrapins in Maryland. Like whether there are a lot of turtles in Maryland, like I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, and if there are, who cares?
There are some cool ones though, right? Like Ohio State, the Buckeyes. I mean, the Buckeyes is pretty cool. I think
it's at least unique to them.
Yeah, and then an underrated one is Purdue, the Boilermakers.
Boilermakers is a good one. Yeah,
it is a good one. As much as I hate Purdue, it is a good one.
Yeah. We'll
and there
never
are some,
forgive. I hate the refs more, but yeah.
Right. There are some like examples, but I agree with what you're saying. Like across the board, I think the Southern conferences, SEC and ACC, tend to have better, history tied into their traditions than other schools.
I have always thought, going back to the Florida State thing, I've always thought of, and this is completely just subjective to me, but Florida State is kind of a kindred spirit. I think a part of that is because I associate Bowden and Fulmer so closely with their programs, and I thought they were similar men, similar coaches, kind of prominent the same era. But I've always, my wife has friends. She spent some of her high school years in Florida, military brat, but that's kind of her home state in her formative years. And it's just easier for me to get along with the ones who their town was in North Florida. So a lot of her friends ended up in Gainesville, but a couple ended up at Florida State. And it's just easier for me to be like, yeah, I don't hate y'all as bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah, and the headquarter of Dunder Mifflin was in Tallahassee for a while.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
you know,
That's true.
I just
It
kept that.
was. Absolutely. All right. Well, Nick, plug our socials.
You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. And you can find us on YouTube, the Volatile Podcast. You can find us on YouTube. You can also find us on X at volatile_1998. So catch us now while the good vibes are rolling. We're going to fend Jeff off from doing Rocky Top Roots in a way that's going to make us drive off a cliff. And we're just going to ride good vibes all the way into what is going to be a horrible football season. So,
Agreed.
Oh.
Yeah, and if you're out there, Jalen Hurd, Big John Summers, we want you guys on the podcast. So we'll be reaching out. Check those DMs, boys. All right. Thank you for joining us. Remember, it's terminal.